name's Shaya, and we're gonna do moon teachings with my dad.
The Newtonal lunar calendar is much different than the calendar that we use today, because the calendar that we use now is based around the sun. Our ancestors based our calendar system around the moon. So every month represents one moon. One of the things that are similar with our calendar system is we have 4 seasons. And you can see on the chart, it's OH, KLA-H, CLOP-H, and IH. That's winter, spring, summer, and fall. So those parts are all the same. But the moons are different. Every month in the calendar that we use, there's different numbers of days, right? Some have 30, some have 31, and February has 28, and sometimes it has 29. So it can get really confusing sometimes with that calendar system. But the way that our ancestors kept track of time with the moons was a lot less confusing, because the moon always has the same type of a pattern. 29 and a half days is how much it is on average, and then the moon changes to another one. So all of these represent the 13 moons of our ancestors. So the lunar calendar system that our ancestors used begins on each new moon. In our language, that's Hintlichich, new moon. 29 and a half days makes one full moon. Hintlichich, the new moon. Uptapi is the first quarter as the moon is growing. Mithlunk is the full moon. And Quatla is when the moon is shrinking and is back at quarter again. It goes all through the 29 and a half days and makes one full lunar cycle. Why do you think our ancestors followed a calendar system that was based on the moon rather than the sun?
Because the moon controls our tides?
Right. We live on an island that's surrounded by the ocean.
Dun, dun, dun!
Using the lunar calendar system, we know when it's going to be high tide and low tide, and it's best for harvesting foods.
You said our ancestors had 13 moons. Why is that?
Well, because we didn't follow the solar calendar system of 365 days, we followed month by month, which was different. And so each year could be a little longer or a little shorter, depending on what we were harvesting and what was harvestable at that time of year. So you'll notice that the 13 moons that are here on this chart, they all have different names, obviously, and they all represent something that's either harvestable or something that we would have been doing as a family during that particular moon that's important to us, the activities that we're involved in, and that's how we named these moons. So our family could have these 13 names for these moons, but another family in our nation could have different names for each moon because they might be doing different things that moon.
Interesting.
Let's start with Te'asumk. That's the first moon of winter. And Te'as means literally sitting on the ground. So this is the sitting on the ground moon. This represents that this is the time of year when it's winter solstice and we get the darkest night and the longest night and the shortest day. The next moon of winter is called Tsumasumk. And Tsumasumk means that the earth is washing itself clean moon. And during this moon, we generally have a lot of flooding. The waters rise really high because of the rain waters and the snow melt and all of those things from the mountain. The third moon of winter is Aitumk. And Aitumk is the false spawning moon. That's when the herring start to arrive in our territory and they're looking for a place to spawn, but it generally takes some time to feel comfortable with the proper place to spawn, and that's occurring during this moon, which is followed by the fourth and final moon of winter, which is Ayakumk. And Ayakumk is the herring spawning moon, and that's when they're actually laying their herring roe, and it's a huge food source for our people. The next moon starts in Kla'ich in spring, and that's Huyakumk. And Huyakumk is the geese in formation moon. So when we look up into the skies during this moon, we can see that the geese are taking flight and they're arriving in our territories, and it represents this particular moon. The next moon, again, is related to birds, and it's called Pawatsumk. And Pawatsumk is the nesting moon. So a lot of birds at this time are starting to lay their eggs and are starting to nest in that way. The third moon of Kla'ich, of spring, is Kawashumk. And Kawashumk is the salmon berry moon. And now we're starting to see that berries are starting to become available in our territories, and we would often go and harvest those. Next we have Klupich, summer. And the first moon that we have is Aksatsumk, which is the wasp or bee moon. And of course that's the time of year when wasps and bees are busy in pollinating all of the different flowers. The next moon after that is Satsapunk, which is the spring salmon moon. And the spring salmon are making their way up our rivers and have always been a huge food source for our people. Followed closely and next by Hinkoasont, the last moon of summer, which is the dog salmon moon. And again, another important species of fish for our people that many of our ancestors and people still today smoke and preserve for the cold winter months. Next we move into Aich, which is fall. And the first moon is Cheakumt. Cheakumt means the cutting moon. And this is the time of year, just like with Hinkoas, our people were often cutting all the salmon up into nice big fat slabs and hanging them in the smokehouses to be smoked and cured for the winter months. Followed by Yachshikumt, which is the sweeping moon, which is often associated with cleaning out your house and getting rid of all the things that we don't need anymore and preparing for a new winter home, because our ancestors would move from location to location throughout the year. Which refers to the last moon of Aich, Hayaskakumt, which literally means moving inland. So our ancestors would spend a lot of time during the better seasons, when the weather was better, harvesting out on the ocean front. And then when the weather got really bad during the winter, we would move inland, and that's what that moon represents. So we know that this last Halloween was a full moon, right here, Mitchum, but it happens to be Remembrance Day, which is November 11th. So we're 11 days after the last full moon. So can you find out where we are on the lunar calendar today?
Boop.
Right. And so now we can see that we're nearing a new moon and that a whole new cycle is about to start itself. And if we're living next to the ocean and we're trying to decide when we're going to go harvest food from a low tide. So now we can see that we're getting close to Hintlachit, a new moon. We happen to be at the end of Yachshikumt right now, and Hayaskakumt is coming. So in traditional times, we would have been preparing to move, right? Move inland. And we can also tell by this that we're getting closer to better tides, low tides, high tides for harvesting food or moving big logs or whatever we need to do with those tides when they're down at their lowest and up at their highest. Okay. Another thing that's really important is with many of our families in New Channel territory, new moon to full moon was a time of spiritual practice. And so it was believed by our people, and is by many of our people still today, that as the moon's growing, so is the spiritual strength and energy around us. So this was a common time for us to be out doing spiritual cleansing in the ocean or doing spiritual activities that we might need to do to recharge ourselves or to protect ourselves. So that's why it's important for us. We often forget these things today with the calendar system that we use. So this chart is one way to be able to relearn these teachings of the way that our ancestors followed the moon system instead of the sun as a calendar. We can also do it with this necklace that we made out of Devil's Club. The black bead represents the new moon, and this large bead represents the full moon. And you move this bead along the necklace to represent each day.